Overreactions to what we've seen so far in Week 11. Geoff, we begin with you. Pierce, he has been texting me all morning long. He's DMing me. He's reaching out on LinkedIn. I'm hearing from him everywhere because he's very disappointed he was not scheduled for this very show to gloat about the Titans' loss to the Texans. So give us any reason at all you can come up with to not just rip up our Tennessee Super Bowl tickets and buy the dip to plus 2,000.
Okay, first of all, Pierce has probably never texted you in his life. But as far as the Texans go, yeah, let's talk about them for a little bit. I mean, or the Titans, I should excuse me. We don't really need to talk about the Texans much. Great win, by the way. Great job. But the Titans are in an interesting spot. I mean, we knew that this was going to happen eventually with the Titans. They beat these teams. They beat the Saints without Derrick Henry. They beat the Rams when nobody even gave them any shot in that game. But you knew that this team would eventually throw in a stinker. And they did it earlier in the season, even when they had Derrick Henry against the Jets. This is the kind of team the Titans are. They will play down to their opponents every time and again, every now and again. But as we've seen from time and time throughout, the last 3 years, they also step their game up against stiff competition, especially when they're undervalued. Yeah, I think you should think about the Titans here. This is still a team who has a shot at getting Derrick Henry back late in the year. A.J. Brown isn't going to be out forever. Their defense has played a little bit better of late. It's not like they allowed 40 points to the Texans or something. The Texans got up early, ran the ball a little bit, and the Titans offense couldn't respond. The bigger issue is this like the end of the Titans offense, and can they not figure out how to move the ball a little bit? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they'll be able to do enough. Again, this AFC is wide open. I like going to the Texans to win the conference at plus 800. That's been my kind of go-to bet. And now that they've dipped again, I think they're still a good bet.
Reid, I think Geoff hit on this, obviously, that, if we're talking about a team that is, at full strength, has its best players, has Derrick Henry, and they're still sliding to teams like the Texans, that's one story. But when they're so clearly undermanned, you have to figure they're going to get right eventually, right?
Yeah, and that's when you look at some of these features when it's, MVPs, when it's Super Bowl, you try and buy these teams when the sentiment, right, the emotion of it is that it's all-time low, and that's what Tennessee is right now. And Houston, I don't think this was a huge surprise. Like Geoff mentioned, you play at your zenith, your apex, you're going to fall, and you're going to fall hard, and especially when you throw 4 interceptions when you're Ryan Tannehill and you fumble it twice, you get the ball back, but you fumble it twice, that's not going to cut it. The one thing that worries me, though, with Tennessee, their schedule actually is not bad when you talk about playing up to their competition. They got New England, they got the 49ers, they play Houston, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, and Miami. So that kind of scares you if they play down to their competition, but obviously you want to see them beat New England. It's that the fact that the running game is really non-existent. Dontrell Hilliard is an undrafted free agent in his 4th year. He's 5'11", 205 pounds, whatever it is, and he's getting the bulk of the carries. It feels weird saying this, but you need to feature Adrian Peterson because that's the style of running that they need to do. And most of his passes, Ryan Tannehill last week, were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. That's why defenses like Houston can just have their linebackers and their safeties play up, pick them off, and then play defensively. So, with the Tennessee Titans, they need to get healthy, and they need to do it quickly because the AFC is wide open, especially when you look at a team like the Colts who are at plus 4,000 to win the Super Bowl.
Boys, let's stay with the upset theme. You mentioned the Colts, Reid. They blew out the previously division-leading Bills in Buffalo. You like how I throw that in. Indy's still 2 back in the South, though. The Colts odds to make the playoffs, they're minus 130. Reid, last week we talked all about Jonathan Taylor, the offensive player of the year odds. He's up to plus 300 from plus 2,000. A zillion touchdown game will do that for you. Also up to plus 2,000 from plus 10,000 for league MVP. So do either of those bets interest you?
Yeah, OPOY, Offensive Player of the Year, is much more intriguing to me. You look at how that award goes. It usually goes to the best receiver running back, right? Or best non-offensive quarterback, right? 3 of the last 7 years have gone to a running back specifically. You saw DeMarco Murray, Todd Gurley, and then Derrick Henry in 2020. And look, Derrick Henry had an amazing season last year, a season that we probably won't see from anybody other than Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry again in the future. So yeah, Offensive Player of the Year is much more enticing because the last time the MVP was won, coincidentally, from a running back was AP in 2012. The quarterback position, though, that's where, this is a year, guys, that the quarterback position at the very top has not been playing stellar at all. I still think that award is up for grabs. Look at Lamar and Kyler Murray. These guys have been out of the, Kyler Murray's been out for the last 3 or 4 weeks and Lamar out last week. If those numbers seem enticing, if you look at their schedules in Arizona, they get the Bears, the Rams, the Lions, the Colts, the Cowboys, and Seattle. Kyler can pick those teams apart. And for Baltimore, you get Cleveland twice, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, the Rams, the Steelers twice. So both of those teams and those quarterbacks could have a nice little path to MVP.
What about you, Geoff? I know there is no bigger Carson Wentz fan than you, so you all in on the Colts?
I mean, I'm pretty much the same sentiment as Reid. I do think he's a very good bet at plus 300 to win the Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, typically that award, again, it's a lot of it is just what have you done for me lately? And if Jonathan Taylor ends the season stronger than Cooper Kupp, and I really do think it's down to we're pretty close to getting it down to like a 2-person race here, then it's probably going to go to Taylor. And, again, you're getting better odds on Taylor. You're getting over double the value on Cooper Kupp. Look at where Cooper Kupp is in the receiving totals and stuff versus Jonathan Taylor in the rushing. Nobody is catching Jonathan Taylor in total rushing yards this year. I'm sorry, Nick Chubb is 300 yards behind him. He would need basically a couple historic games. I think there is a chance that a player like Devontae Adams spikes up maybe with some heavier usage towards the end of the year, and maybe it cuts into Cooper Kupp's lead where it's at least very close at the end. I'll take Taylor here for sure in the Offensive Player. I think that's a good bet at plus 300. Reid mentioned it. I'm sorry. I mean, the Colts would have to almost overtake Tennessee for the division win, I think, for Jonathan Taylor to get serious MVP discussion. It has been a mixed bag at the top for quarterbacks, but it's such a quarterback-centric award, the MVP award, that I think even just a couple good games by Josh Allen to end the season, and he probably gets the nod.
What's up with the Bills, Moose? Talking about quarterbacks, obviously Carson Wentz. I know you're a huge Josh Allen guy. Buffalo's still favored to take the East at minus 175 and the conference at plus 350, but they're now second to the Patriots in the division with a pair of head-to-head meetings left, 2 of those in the next 4 weeks, so should be pretty interesting. But should Buffalo still be favored in both these spots?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, and I was just using Josh Allen as an example. It could be any quarterback that gets hot at the end of the year, Rodgers, Brady, whatever. But as far as the Bills go, look, the reason they're still favored is simple. I mean, the market still thinks that the Bills are the better team here, and they have 2 games in hand over the Patriots. They're apparently going to be favored. If they had those games right now, the Bills would obviously be the favorites. That's why they're still the favorites in the division. Now, is the Bills the team you want to back here at minus 175? No, I really don't think that's the case. You're essentially getting the Patriots, as underdogs in those games coming up versus the Bills by betting them at plus 135. We've seen from the Bills, when their offensive line is clicking and that passing offense is clicking, they can just blow teams out because their defense is still quite good. But man, I mean, at some point, this team has to show a little bit of consistency because it has been few and far between this year. So I think the Bills are still overvalued in the market right now, minus 175. Are they still the slightly better team? I don't even know if you can say that anymore. The New England defense has certainly surpassed them. New England runs the ball. Buffalo has no running game to fall back on, and that's really been the story of this year. If that offensive line isn't protecting Josh Allen and the passing game isn't clicking, this team can be had. So give me the Patriots here right now. I don't think it's the supreme bet or you have to do it, but right now you look at those division odds, man. Yeah, you got to lean Patriots.
Geoff, you can be skeptical all you want about whether Pierce has been texting me, but I promise you, Reid and we've been texting all season about these Bills because he knows that I have been a doubter. So, Reid, what's your outlook on this team?
Yeah, I mean, all the Patriots homers and by proxy, the Buffalo downers.
Thank you. Yep.
Exactly. Of course. Right. It makes sense. Everything that Geoff laid out makes perfect sense. But I'm actually going to side with I get why the Bills are still the favorite, right? Because a lot of sportsbook, they want to protect themselves because this team can get hot. We've seen Buffalo get hot, especially towards the end of seasons. They play, obviously, in cold weather, and those close games, they go either way, right, in cold weather. And Buffalo, when you get that type of home field advantage, it's going to make a lot of sense. And you look at their remaining schedule with the Saints, the Patriots twice, like you mentioned, Geoff, the Bucks, and Carolina in their next 5. That's a pretty tough test. If they go 3-2, sort of I would like to talk about the college playoffs. If they go 3-2 and they actually look decent, it's going to make a lot of sense on why the market, right, is emotionally connected to the Buffalo Bills with how good Josh Allen is playing. there's a correlated stat of him being one of the favorites for the MVP, right? It just looks like that. And if you take a look at their defense and their offense, they're hitting a little bit of a skid. But I have faith in Sean McDermott and Brian Daboll that they have to learn how to adjust, right? We see with Kansas City and Andy Reid, it took a while for Patrick Mahomes to be like, hey, I'm going to check down Charlie this game and beat these teams by 1,000 paper cuts. That's what the Bills have to do. And if they can skate out those next 5 games going 3-2, I still think they deserve to be the favorite. Even though the Patriots, if you look at their last 5 wins, Jets, Chargers, the Sam Darnold-led Carolina Panthers, Cleveland, and Atlanta, not exactly the best teams out there. And you could argue the same thing for Buffalo, but the Patriots have had a pretty nice test of 5 games, even though they're winning. You got to give them the credit that they're winning those games.
The AFC East, it's not the prettiest division, sort of to your point, Reid, but the AFC North still very much up for grabs, and you've got every team up over 500 right now. The Ravens, they just barely rallied by the Bears without Lamar Jackson, and Baltimore, of course, splitting its last 4 after that 5-game winning streak. Should the Ravens still be a clear favorite to win this division, Reid?
I think so. Look, the defense has a lot of issues, right? Patrick Queen in their linebacker position has a lot of issues. He's getting better. But I still look at this team, and if you look at their record, guys, the teams that they've beat, they have a difference maker in Lamar Jackson. And I know we didn't see him last week because he was ill, but they still have a lot of solid players. Marquise Brown not in as well. Latavius Murray does come back. I think that's going to help this team. And I'm not scared. Cincinnati, they beat a bad Raiders team. Trust me. I've watched enough Raiders games to know that this is exactly who the Raiders are. Putting up 32 against the Raiders isn't exactly a tough test, right? We've seen Cincinnati lose to the Jets. So I'm not exactly scared of Cincinnati. You still have a young team that come down the stretch. It's going to be a little difficult. I give the coaching favorite to a guy like John Harbaugh in every situation. And Lamar Jackson, I still think he's one of the best quarterbacks and a guy who could absolutely change the landscape of any single game.
Bengals just a game back in that division here, Geoff. What are your thoughts on the Ravens or any other contender for that matter in the North?
I mean, there is not a team in the NFL who has been luckier this year than the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, I've said this like every week on this show, but even just last week, okay, they have to start their backup quarterback. What happens to the other quarterback on the other side? He goes out like a quarter into the game. I mean, how lucky can this team get? A 66-yard field goal to beat the Detroit Lions, overtime games, penalties. This team could so easily be under 500 in the record right now. I think their comeuppance is coming. They have the Browns twice, the Steelers and the Bengals, the Packers and the Rams in their next 6 games here. The Bengals are so close to being a very, very good team. They've got more efficient on offense. Their defense is solid. It's not really up there with elite. I also think the Browns could go on a late season surge here if Nick Chubb stays healthy. So all things considered, I am definitely fading the Baltimore Ravens as favorites. I think you can even look to the Browns at plus 450 or the Bengals at plus 300. All things considered here, the Ravens have a really tough schedule. I know it's Lamar Jackson. He's still the best player in this division. And if I'm wrong, it's because Lamar just went nuts over the last few games. But I think this team rides the right side of variance to end the year. And I think they end up getting overtaken.
Guys, after putting up 43 points on the Falcons, Cowboys just limped out to a 19-9 loss in Kansas City. Not even a single touchdown, obviously. It was all field goals. The Chiefs back to being AFC favorites for the Super Bowl at plus 750. Cowboys still very much in the conversation, plus 800 over in the NFC. So which team do you feel like you learned more about here, Moose? I mean, are you more inclined to chase the Chiefs for futures bets? Are you starting to fade the Cowboys? What are you thinking?
So, I mean, one underrated story of the last 3 weeks, while everyone was busy beating up on the Chiefs, is that their defense has really improved. It's improved in all facets too, especially against the run. You saw it last night. Or yesterday, last afternoon, I should say. They put a cap in Ezekiel Elliott. They didn't let him take over the game. They didn't let Dak run the ball much. This defense has gotten better, and that's a nice spot to be as a Kansas City Chiefs backer because. This offense, I mean, if the only thing the Chiefs need to fix right now is the offense, that's not bad. I mean, because you do still have Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill there to hopefully do that. So, yeah, I'm not going out of my way to bet the Chiefs. I still think this AFC is wide open, but that is the biggest story out of that game. I still think Dallas is a very solid team. Maybe not as solid as people were thinking they were last week, but the NFC, certainly, they deserve to be in the top 4 or 5 teams there. At plus 400, I would take bigger money on, the Packers or maybe even the Rams there. But I think the Chiefs deserve to be like co-favorites right now because that AFC, again, I mean, I like the Patriots, but the Ravens at plus 600, I'm not backing them. The Titans, I think, are interesting at plus 8, but the Chiefs definitely deserve to be co-favorites right now. This is a team that's like one Mahomes hot stretch away from basically being in top form again. So, I chase this one.
Reid, we were just showing the odds on the screen. These are two of the top 5 odds, favorite odds to win a Super Bowl, obviously, here. So same thing I asked Geoff. Is there one team of these two you felt like you learned a little bit more about from this game yesterday?
Yeah. The defense, for Kansas City is looked good in spots, right? But the one thing that you have to worry about, though, is how much of it is actually the foundational change in their defense, right? Spagnuolo is still a guy who will send 80,000 blitzes every single game, and that puts him in really, really bad spots. And if you had a guy like Daniel Sorensen, who's one of the worst in coverage, that's going to hurt. And again, going back to this division and going back to the Raiders, when you can look really good against the Raiders offense when they can't stretch the field and their best their best deep ball is Darren Waller. But going back to this question specifically, like I'm less inclined to be down on the Dallas Cowboys because I do think they do have the foundational pieces. Their offensive line is finally healthy. Chris Jones, I think if there's any storyline too here is that Chris Jones on the defensive side was actually going back into the nose tackle position, and he absolutely wrecked this game, right? Dak Prescott, I almost said Derek Prescott. Dak Prescott was under pressure all day long. He couldn't do anything. And when you have CeeDee Lamb go out, when Amari Cooper is already out, when Ezekiel Elliott was banged up, you got Dalton Schultz, Cedric Wilson, and Michael Gallup as your offensive threats. It's not going to cut it, right? It's not going to cut it against the Chiefs. Any defense will look good against those guys, especially if you don't practice as number ones. So I'm less down on the Cowboys, more up on the Chiefs because, like Geoff mentioned, they can get it going very quickly. They have a really good coaching staff and obviously a very, very good quarterback. But I'm liking the Dallas Cowboys right now. If they can keep on slipping, they got a decent defense too that can stop a lot of these teams, and they have an offense to stay with anyone.